Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film College Coach from 1933. This is continuing my quest to review as much of William Wellman's filmography as I possibly can. This is a kind of satirical look at the college coach industry, and I'm not really a big fan of Wellman comedies. I didn't really like Nothing Sacred. I like Small Town Girl, but this I liked a lot more than I usually do most Wellman comedies. It has kind of a light-hearted feel, although it does feel like it kind of rushes through a lot of the events of the film in certain points, but it does feel like Wellman's more focused on the performance of the coach, played by Pat O'Brien, a fast-talking, almost like a gangster kind of college football coach. He's not the kind of football coach I feel like we're used to anymore. We're more used to kind of the typical, like, understated, really into football coach. And this guy kind of talks like a fast-talking city man. So I was kind of surprised by College Coach and its kind of fast-talking 30s way about it. A coach who is hired by a college who is about to go bankrupt, and they realize, based on the popularity of their football team and college football in general, that if they get a good coach and have lots of admission, they'll make lots of money, which is kind of what goes on today with college football, even though I don't know much about it, but I assume that is what's going on. And they actually listen to the radio and show how popular it is and have a little screen show up that a lot of people have misconstrued as thinking they turned on a TV, but they didn't have TV like that in 1933. Wellman just wanted to illustrate what they were watching. It's kind of interesting, but it does look a lot like a TV screen. Just an interesting little coincidence there. So they hire the best coach they can, who is Coach Gore. He's brought on, and he brings a lot of students into the school who aren't really great students, but they're great football players to make a great football team, and he's victorious. But then as he goes on being a great football coach, he's ignoring his wife, Claire, played by Anne Dvorak, and he's passing kids no matter what their grades are, and also does a play that ends up getting a player on a rival team killed, and the college is less than impressed, even though he wins the 1932 championship, what he's doing to the school, and he has to kind of win victoriously while still gaining the respect of the board and the school and trying to play by the rules, which is kind of the plot. It kind of goes in many directions. You never really feel like Coach Gore, played by Pat O'Brien, is really in that much trouble. He always feels like he has a scheme up his sleeve, and he feels like the kind of rapscallion that Wellman really likes in a protagonist. I think sometimes there might be things that they're making fun of football at the time, which I probably didn't get because I don't really think about 1930s college football that much, believe it or not. But I think Wellman does a pretty good job of making a pretty fun character. Pat O'Brien is always fast-talking, usually only when he's in the coach. When he's with his wife, he's a lot slower and almost like a different personality in certain scenes. But when he's talking fast and being a coach, there's some of the more interesting scenes and more fun scenes of the movie. I like Pat O'Brien's performance because I like that kind of fast-talking, pre-code Hollywood kind of performance. This is technically a pre-code film, and I guess the only part that's really pre-code is when he kills someone basically and gets away with it. Although it was an accident, I don't think he actually intended to get them killed, but I feel like after the Hays Code they couldn't have gotten away with that, but that's about as pre-code as they really get. Even though this is a comedy, it might not feel like a film that would go under the trademarks of Wellman's filmography. It actually does in a lot of places. The only part that really is camera-wise, and this is shot by the same guy, Arthur Lee Todd, who would go on to shoot Wild Boys of the Road with Wellman, is the shot where Anne Dvorak is waiting again for Coach Gore, and she's pacing back and forth, and they just have a shot of her feet, which is very Wellman. The other thing is that Anne Dvorak ends up going out with one of the players on Coach's team, which you saw in Thunderbirds and in Central Airport, where a younger man is stealing the older man's wife because he's not giving her enough attention. Love triangles seem to be a common thread throughout Wellman's films. He didn't write this film, but it is interesting to see that happen again. It's not as heavily emphasized. I feel like it's more emphasized on the team doing well and the coach proceeding to do well. Pat O'Brien, who was third billed after Dick Powell, who isn't in it that much, and Anne Dvorak, really is the star of this movie and gives a kind of fun, freewheeling performance that is very of its time, but I really enjoyed it. Got me into the movie. He was kind of the main thing I liked about the film. And I particularly like Anne Dvorak. She's very beautiful. She was also in Love is a Racket, which this film kind of has a similar feel to. Love is a Racket was released in 1932. This was in 33, but it feels like the same kind of Wellman. Wellman liked to jump around between genres, and this is the only real sports movie I can think of from him, or that I've seen at least. It has that kind of lighthearted feel. It's a lot more lighthearted than Love is a Racket. It doesn't get as serious even in the serious moments. Pat O'Brien almost seems to stop the film from going to that place. Dick Powell really isn't in it that much. Pat O'Brien should get a little more credit for this film. This is very much a kind of 30s studio comedy. I'm not a big football fan. I'm probably more of a fan of like Friday Night Lights and things like that than I am actual football. I've watched football before, and I've had phases of my life where I've watched whole seasons of football, but I'm not really that into it, so I'm not into 30s football at all or anything, or college football I've never been into. But I like this film, and it was a film I was kind of like, well, it's short, it's from the 30s, I do want to review all these Wellman films, so I'll see it, and it won me over a lot more than I really thought it would. And so as a kind of lighthearted 30s comedy, it was exactly kind of what I wanted it to be, and it surprised me. If I saw another film with Pat O'Brien, I would see it. Apparently he did more of a nicer coach in a later film, and I don't think I'd really like to see that. I liked his kind of fun, kind of smart alecky, like, here kid, we're gonna do this kind of role. I mean, sure, he wasn't the most honest coach in the world, but he kind of won me over in his sleazy, fast-talking way about it. I've talked a few times about how Wellman would let kind of a performance like take over the movie and like guide the film and the way he's making it, and I feel like this is another one of those. You know, certainly there are better films and better performances that do that. Stanwyck did that a lot with Wellman and Janet Gaynor and James Cagney, but Wellman knew how to work with what he had, and he certainly did that very well with this film and Pat O'Brien. This isn't probably going to be one of the best remembered Wellman films, but as a kind of more obscure 1930s pre-code film, I found it fairly enjoyable, and I'm not a huge older Hollywood sports film fan, but I think if you are into football films, I think this would be a nice surprise because the coach is different, the players are different, and it has a nice flow to it, and it's only 76 minutes, like a good 1930s film really should. If you're into all those things, and especially if you're into Wellman, I was kind of surprised with how much fun this film really was. Despite when it gets serious, it never loses that tone, showing how Wellman knew how to keep it together and do what a good studio director really could, was bounce around genres and do them well. And I think this shows probably why they let him do comedies and thought he was so good at it. Probably one of my more favorite Wellman comedies I've seen thus far. So if you have seen College Coach and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my Wellman review playlist for all the previous Wellman films I have already reviewed. And also, I forgot to mention, but it is noteworthy, that John Wayne has apparently like a 12-second appearance in this film. It was his last bit part role, but I did not notice him. He did a couple bit parts in Wellman films, and then, of course, eventually starred in 3 of them, and produced even more. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.